9999, a day that is etched into gamers' minds across the world. That is the launch date of the Sega Dreamcast. We are approaching now the 25th anniversary of Sega's last true home console, and my personal favorite video game system of all time. So, in honor of the 25th anniversary of the Sega Dreamcast, today I'm going to bring you a list of Dreamcast games that I had in my personal library and that I feel you should also give a chance and try out. If you have a way of searching for these games, please do so and give them a go. The Dreamcast is known for so many hit titles. It's hard to choose which games to put on this list and which not. So I decided to go with my personal games that I owned while I had the system. But there are so many honorable mentions that need to be taken into account that aren't going to be spoken about in full, but let's get right to it. 18-wheeler American Pro Trucker. The main purpose of this game is to make it to the finish line with trucks of cargo. Players are given a set amount of time, but can ram into special vans that will add 3 seconds to the timer. There are several characters to choose from, each with a unique truck and attributes. The game starts out in New York City, and players travel across the United States, ending in San Francisco. After stage 1, the game gives the player a choice of trailer. One trailer is harder to haul, but provides a bigger payoff, while the other choice is easier to haul, but provides a smaller payoff. Money is deducted from the total when the trailer is hit. Players can sound the truck's horn and make other cars on the road yield, and slipstream behind large vehicles to gain momentary speed. In addition to the time limit, players also compete with the rival trucker named Lizardtail. Crossing the finish line before Lizardtail yields additional money. In between levels, players can park the truck in a minigame to earn more cash and upgrades for their truck, such as an improved horn. This game was one of the first games that I saw that was really close to what the arcade counterpart looked like at the time. Ironically enough, this was one of the last arcade ports for the Dreamcast that was brought over by Sega. This game did come out later on in PlayStation 2 and GameCube, ported over by Acclaim. Arrow Wings. This game was beautiful to look at the time. Arrow Wings is focused on the formation flight and aerobatic, as the player is a flight team leader. The game is considered as the first true attempt of combat flight simulation on a console, on the contrary of the arcade-oriented Ace Combat. Arrow Wings series provides fairly accurate flight physics, 3D cockpit views, real weapon loads, possibilities to take off, land on an airbase or carrier, refueling, and a replay video system which is able to record the entire flight and offering the possibility to create your own movie with more than 30 different cameras, including the popular shaky cam. This game received above average reviews at the time, coming into game rankings, and Japan Famitsu gave it around a 30 out of 40. Overall, it's a very good game, and it was followed up with a sequel called Arrow Wings 2 and Arrow Dancing, all the way up to Aero Elite. Check out Arrow Wings if you have the chance for the Dreamcast. Alien Front Online. One of the first games that I ever had the opportunity to play online. That's right, Sega Dreamcast featured a modem, so it allowed you to play video games over the internet with other people, which was revolutionary back in 1999. Alien Front Online came out in 2001. It was released for the Dreamcast. It is an online version of the arcade game Alien Front, where it was bundled with a microphone accessory and was only released in North America. The game was brought back online by fans through private servers back in 2016. In the game, players use armored vehicles to fight battles staged in arenas. Players can choose which side to fight for, the Triclops or the military. players can also choose one of 3 different vehicles, each having its own advantages and disadvantages. Although the game is fully playable for one person, it was primarily designed as an online game in which up to 8 players, up to 4 on each side, can play. Players move around the arena attempting to shoot each other while also looking for power-ups for the vehicles. The game is played for a set number of minutes, after which the team with the most kills are declared the winners. If you were a fighting fan, you needed a Sega Dreamcast. Capcom vs. SNK and Capcom vs. SNK 2, Mark of the Millennium 2001, are fantastic versions of the franchise fighting games. The original Capcom vs. SNK 2 was released on the Naomi hardware in arcades, with Sega handling the American arcade release, making this a natural fit onto the Sega Dreamcast. Aspects of the first games were tweaked, including the ratio system. In contrast to the fixed system of the original, players can now freely select characters and assign each of them to a number 1 to 4, determining their relative strength, adding up to a maximum team ratio of 4. Teams can now consist of maximum of 3 characters as opposed to 4 in the first game. Additional characters were added, including more characters from Capcom and SNK titles outside of the Street Fighter and King of Fighters series, for a total of 48 characters. The Groove system from Millennium Fight 2000 has been augmented to include 4 new systems of play based on various Capcom and SNK fighting games. Do yourself a favor, get yourself a copy of Capcom vs. SNK 2. It is gorgeous to look at and great to play. I bought Coasterworks wanting a Roller Coaster Tycoon type of game for consoles. Well, it was pretty much that. It's a simulation game for Dreamcast, published by Bimbusoft. The game is a simulation of roller coaster design and construction. Each of the levels offers certain requirements that the player must meet to pass the next level. The game starts the player off in a kiddie theme park and progresses to more difficult levels with more difficult requirements. There were direct sequels for this in Japan. This game was released on November 2nd, 2000, in Japan only, as the North America and PAL versions were cancelled for 2001. Third game, called Roller Coaster World, was developed by Takara and published by D3 Publishers in Japan as Simple 2000 Series Volume 33, The Jet Coaster. This game was a little bit above average, nothing great, and by no means was it a Roller Coaster Tycoon type game. But for the time, it was a fun distraction. Check out Coasterworks. Hey, it's Crazy Taxi! Crazy Taxi was Dreamcast's killer app. Don't care what anyone tells you. This game was a must-have for the Dreamcast. This came out in arcades in 1999 and ported to the Dreamcast in 2000. Gameplay is based on picking up taxi customers and driving to their destination as quickly as possible. Reception to Crazy Taxi has always been positive. It was ported to other platforms later on and numerous times, including PS2 and GameCube by Acclaim in 2001, then Windows in 2002, becoming Sega's first multi-platform game after the company transitioned to being a third party. The game has also been released for PlayStation Network, Xbox Live Arcade, iOS, and Android. The main objective of the game, of course, is to pick up customers, take them to their chosen destination as quickly as possible. Along the way, you make money, and it can be earned by performing stunts such as near misses of other vehicles or big jumps. Also drifting. The player is directed to destinations by a large green arrow at the top of the screen. The arrow does not adjust based on obstacles, but rather points in the general direction of the destination. Once the player arrives near the destination, they must stop within a specified zone. When the destination is reached, on how long the player took to compete, then they will earn a rating for that customer. If the customer's timer runs out before the player reaches the destination, the customer will then jump from the taxi without paying the driver. This game was so much fun. San Francisco never looked any better. Remember seeing the graphics at the time, they were stunning, and a killer soundtrack by The Offspring. Crazy Taxi and its sequel, Crazy Taxi 2, are a must-have for your Dreamcast collection. Grind Radio! Jet Grind Radio, as it was released in North America, called Jet Set Radio everywhere else. One of Dreamcast's best looking titles, still holds up graphically beautiful to this day. Beautiful cel shaded graphics. Jet Grind Radio received critical acclaim and considered one of the best game of its decade for its graphics, soundtrack, and gameplay. It won several awards. It was nominated for many others. There's even a Game Boy Advance version developed by Vicarious Vision that was released in 2003. Sequel came out in 2012 called the sequel came out in for the Xbox called Jet Set Radio Future in 2002, and then of course there was a remake in 2012. The players control a member of a gang graffiti tagging inline skaters. The game consists of 3 types of levels: Street, Rival, Showdown, and Trial. The street levels come in 2 categories. The first is to tag graffiti points in each area previously tagged by a rival gang before the timer runs out, while evading authorities. And the second category serves as a boss battle, by chasing the rival gang members and spraying graffiti on them. The more graffiti points are sprayed, the more deadly the authorities become. Graffiti points are marked by arrows and require paint to tag them. This game was one of a kind for its time. Beautiful graphics. I cannot stress this enough. It was the first time really that cel shading looked this good before The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came out. Do yourself a favor. Go pick up Jet Set Radio for the Sega Dreamcast. Metropolis Street Racer is a racing video game developed by Bizarre Creations and published by Sega exclusively for the Dreamcast. The game was intended to be a Dreamcast launch title. Due to numerous delays, it was not released until November 2000 in Europe, with a North American version following in January 2001. Gameplay is centered around single-player mode, with tracks and cars in the multiplayer mode being unlocked at the same time as in the single-player game. The premise is that a street racer, the player must impress other drivers with quick but stylish driving in a series of challenges. These challenges are then set in series of 10s, called chapters. There are 25 in total, with completion of all challenges opening the next chapter, assuming the player has enough kudos, and unlocking a new car. Each challenge is on a different track, and unlocking a challenge unlocks that track in time attack and multiplayer modes. What's interesting about this is that this is the precursor and the beginning of a beloved racing franchise that you might know of called Project Gotham Racing. That's right, Project Gotham Racing got its start as Metropolis Street Racing for the Dreamcast. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, New Age of Heroes. This is hands down my favorite fighting game of all time. You can fight me on that. It is the best fighting game of all time. It includes 56 playable characters. It's enormous characters from across the Marvel franchises and the Avengers and X-Men, including characters from Capcom like Resident Evil, Mega Man, and so many others like Street Fighter. This game is bar none the best fighting game. It is a tag team based fighting game. You can select 3 players on each side in one-on-one battles as opposed to a team of 2 characters in the previous entries. This is the 4th installment in the Marvel vs. Capcom series. Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes is the game introduces more refined versions of the variable systems, but then you progress. With Marvel vs. Capcom 2, it does re-implement the variable assist gameplay mechanics introduced in Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, allowing players to call upon one of their off-screen team members to perform a single special move to aid them. Each playable character possesses 3 different types of assists. denoted by the Greek letters A, B, and Y, which can range from projectile attacks to healing moves. You can just combine that with all types of characters if you want to go with an all-projectile team or a melee character with a projectile character. You can make your dream team. I challenge anybody to come at me. I will pick Ryu, Cyclops, and Cable as my go-to. And I challenge you, please go pick up a copy of this game. If you do not have a Dreamcast, if you cannot emulate this game is finally out of the jail cell, and you can pick it up on the Nintendo Switch in the Marvel vs. Capcom collection later this year. The beginning of a enormous franchise. We're going to be talking about NBA 2K. This game came out in 1999, sports game developed by Visual Concept and published by Sega. As I talked about briefly at the beginning of the video, when Electronic Arts decided to pull out and not provide sports games anymore for the Dreamcast, Sega went into the business of making it themselves. With this game, the graphics were amazing. It was so much better than NBA Live in every respect, and of course it just ballooned from here. The NBA 2K franchise went on to sell millions upon millions of copies, and it's still to this day being made on multiple platforms. So what can be said about this game? Graphics were way above anything the N64 and PS1 could do. It was way better than what NBA Live was doing. The game features commentary from fictional announcers Bob Steele and Rod West, a play on Bob Barker and Rod Roddy, who were the hosts of announcers respectively on the American game show The Price is Right. But yeah, this was portrayed by Bob Fitzgerald and Rod Brooks, so you had full commentary, and NBA 2K received favorable reviews across the boards, with around an 88% on GameRankings.com back in the day. The last version of this that came out, I believe, was NBA 2K3 on the Dreamcast, if I'm not mistaken. Fantastic franchise, still going strong to this day. Following up what Sega and Visual Concepts did with the NBA franchise, we get NFL 2K. Sometimes this game is just not discussed enough. This game received, I think, like a 92% on Game Rankings overall aggregate. The game received universal acclaim. Of course, it is a professional football, American football game with graphics that were just beyond belief at the time, featuring Randy Moss on the cover. NFL 2K went on to sell millions upon millions of copies and actually rivaled Madden, to the point where when NFL 2K5 came out, it outsold Madden. For the first time ever, Madden was the number 2 player. And then, of course, Electronic Arts, seeing, that could not continue to happen, they went and signed an exclusivity deal with the NFL. And then, of course, NFL 2K kind of fell by the wayside after that. However, from the inception in 1999 through NFL 2K5, I will go on and say that it was probably the best football franchise that you could get your hands on at the time. And it all started on the Sega Dreamcast.
The 49ers will want to put the pressure on early and give the crowd something to cheer about. The Bengals are on the field and
Here we have another heavy hitter for the Dreamcast, made by Capcom, Power Stone. Released only 1 month after Super Smash Bros., this was just right in time for that party-type fighting game Smash. Power Stone originally came out on the Sega Arcade Naomi that we've been speaking about, and later ported to the Sega Dreamcast. Gameplay involves selecting a character and then proceeding to battle the other characters one at a time in various locales. 3-dimensional fighting includes the ability to use special attacks, as well as to pick up and fight with objects such as tables, chairs, rocks, and bombs. During battle, power stones resembling gems of a different color appear in the arena. If a character collects 3 power stones, they transform into a more powerful version of themselves. The character will then be able to use one of the 2 super special attacks, generally a massive long-range power attack and a grab or close-range move. The powered-up mode only lasts until the power bar is fully drained, during which the special attacks can be executed, which completely depletes the power bar, or less special moves can be executed, which only use a small portion of the power. Each match continues until the life bar of one of the 2 characters fighting is depleted. This game was so much fun. You could definitely just go in there, get a buddy, and go ham on each other while you guys played this game. Power Stone by Capcom is now coming out also in the Capcom Fighting Collection 2 that was announced at that Nintendo Direct. So pick this game up if you haven't played it, and if you do want to wait for it, get it on the Switch coming soon. Capcom once again coming through with an amazing game that was only on the Sega Dreamcast until later being ported after the Dreamcast discontinued. Resident Evil Code Veronica, a continuation of the Resident Evil franchise. This originally released for the Dreamcast in 2000. It is the 4th installment in the Resident Evil series and the first to debut on a separate platform that wasn't just from the PlayStation, even though there was Resident Evil on the Saturn previous to this. So, Capcom announced Code Veronica in August of '98 and released it in February 2000. It features survivor horror gameplay similar to previous Resident Evils. This does include that famous tank control. However, now we're getting full-on backgrounds. They're not just pre-rendered, and we're getting like full-on camera action. So we actually see moments where there's not just a fixed camera on the screen, you're seeing it actually move with the characters. And Dreamcast was way more powerful than its PlayStation and Nintendo 64 counterparts when it released. So it was, of course, just going to have incredible visual upgrades from what we had previously seen. Code Veronica was one of my favorite Resident Evil games, and of course, I don't like being scared when I play my video games, so I unfortunately never actually went out and beat this one. However, I don't have anything negative to say. Code Veronica is a masterpiece. Go pick it up. Move over, Gran Turismo. There's a new kid in town. Well, that's what Sega really was going for here with Sega GT. It was intended by Sega to rival Sony's popular Gran Turismo racing series, with the graphics on the Sega Dreamcast being far superior than anything that the PlayStation can handle. It was quite the marvel to look at the time. It was driving strong sales of the PlayStation, so of course Sega wanted to get in on that. The yet unreleased PlayStation 2, however, had a great Gran Turismo down the line. While Sega GT was met with positive reception, sales were only modest, and the Dreamcast was given little traction against its competition. Despite this, Sega would continue the series, and one of the reasons that I actually picked up the original Xbox was because it came with Sega GT 2002, following the demise of the Dreamcast console. Great game, great graphics, great gameplay. Check out Sega GT. Next game is my favorite game of all time. So imagine that. My favorite game of all time on my favorite console of all time. I'm talking about Shenmue, a 1999 action-adventure game developed by AM2. At the time, it was the most expensive video game ever made. The game follows a teenage martial artist, Ryo Hazuki, as he sets out in revenge for the murder of his father in the 1980s of Yokosuka, Japan. The player explores an open world, which at the time was groundbreaking. This is before GTA, this is before Red Dead Redemption. So the player explores this open world, fighting opponents in brawler battles and encountering quick time events, which again was revolutionary at the time. and the environmental detail was considered unprecedented. With numerous interactive objects, you can speak to every character, even if it was one or two sentences. Everybody had pre-recorded dialogue, and it had a real-time day and night system. Well, not so much real-time, but it did have a day and night system. Variable weather effects that you can actually time with the internal Sega Dreamcast clock. So if you played in the winter, you were more than likely going to have winter days. Variable weather effects included non-playable characters with daily schedules and various minigames. After developing successful Sega arcade games including Hang-On, Outrun, and Virtua Fighter, which you can actually play some of these games in the actual game of Shenmue. So Yu Suzuki wanted to create a longer experience and conceived Shenmue as a multi-part epic. Later on, Shenmue 2 did come out for this Dreamcast, and in Japan and in PAL regions. In America, if you wanted to play Shenmue 2, you had to get an Xbox. We finally received Shenmue 3, as Yu Suzuki developed Shenmue 3 independently, and it was released for the PlayStation 4 and Windows in 2019. There is an anime adaptation of Shenmue that premiered in 2022. My favorite game of all time. I highly recommend this game. I'm still waiting for an ending to that saga.
Okay, let me go. I'll tell you.
Skies of Arcadia is a role-playing game with an emphasis on world exploration. The gameplay is similar to early 3D Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games. Player engages enemies in turn-based battles to earn experience points, making their characters stronger. The overworld is divided into 6 regions, traversed by flying airships in 3D space. Discoveries, hidden locations, reward the player with extra benefits. The world map starts out blank, and it is up to the player to chart the map through exploration. The player may also recruit characters they encountered in exploration, allowing them to be placed on the ship or base's staff, adding extra benefits to exploration or battle. Skies of Arcadia is an instant classic, a huge hit for Sega, later coming out on GameCube, and also being re-released way later on for different consoles, I believe, as a remaster. Check out Skies of Arcadia, 100% one of the best, if not the best, RPG on the Dreamcast. The first time I saw Sonic Adventure was at a computer expo. I remember seeing it hooked up to a computer monitor with VGA cords and thinking to myself, wow, that looks amazing. So I went up and I asked, what console or what computer do you have hooked up to that? And I was shocked to find out that it was a Sega Dreamcast with just VGA cables hooked up. Higher resolution, beautiful graphics, and of course there was that killer whale segment that I just couldn't get enough of. Sonic Team really finally brought Sega back on the map and Sonic back on the map. Having really skipped a real Sonic game during the Saturn days, this game was such a welcome addition to the Dreamcast library, especially after having Super Mario 64 dominate and Crash Bandicoot dominate what was 3D platforms at the time. So we finally get Sonic Adventure as a 3D platform game, and overall, the game was actually really good, even though it was a little wonky with some of the characters and a little slow building, for example, with Big the Cat, or, Rose's levels, or, Knuckles' levels weren't my favorite, but overall, this game was really fun. There was a follow-up with Sonic Adventure 2. People really are nostalgic about that game. However, it is not my favorite. I still recommend picking this game up. The visuals at the time were groundbreaking, and of course, it's one of the true great 3D Sonic games. On the PlayStation, we got Soul Edge, but on the Dreamcast, we got Soul Calibur. This game centers on the pursuit of a legendary weapon known as the Soul Edge, now in the possession of a warrior named Nightmare, who slaughters countless people to satisfy his blade's lust. One of the biggest innovations introduced by Soul Calibur to the gameplay system of its predecessor is its A ways to run. Previous Street Fighters had only limited movement along three axes, with side steps and rolls providing useful but unsustained lateral movement. In Soul Calibur, simply holding down the joystick direction causes the character to move in that direction, giving the player a sense of freedom and deepening the strategy of the game. Soul Calibur also features forgiving buffering, allowing players to enter an input for one move before the characters have finished recovering from their previous move, which makes executing a quick succession of moves easier and fluid. Other fighting games such as Tekken and Virtua Fighter series have relatively strict buffering requirements, meaning expert timing is required to pull off many combinations, but Soul Calibur features much more lenient timing to successfully execute these buffers. Finally, the guard impact. Offense blocking maneuver shown in Soul Edge has been given a deeper range of techniques, allowing players to push back or redirect attacks past themselves, as well as swatting away opponents' weapons to stun them. This game was gorgeous at the time, absolutely groundbreaking graphics, looked so much better than its actual arcade counterpart. Soul Calibur is a masterpiece of a game for the Dreamcast and fighting games anywhere. Known in Japan as Power Smash, Virtual Tennis was released for the Dreamcast and ported in the year 2000 and to Windows in 2002. This game also received a sequel, Virtual Tennis 2, which was released for arcades in 01 and then ported to the Dreamcast the same year, later even appearing on PlayStation 2. Of course, it's just a tennis game, but calling it just a tennis game does not do this game justice. At the time, again, with the Dreamcast graphics, it was phenomenal to look at, ultra realistic graphics, very well received. There was a Wii version of Virtual Tennis later on. Of course, you could use the Wii controller as your tennis racket. The game content, of course, had playable characters such as Jim Courier, Cedric Pioline, Tim Henman, and featured tour competitions in Australia, French Cup, the US Super Tennis, the Old England Championships, and of course the Sega Grand Slam match. The reception for this game was highly praised. The version received universal acclaim. Even the Game Boy Advance version received favorable reviews. Metacritic has this game listed for the Dreamcast as a 92 out of 100. You have to pick up this game if you have a Dreamcast or if you just want to experience what the Dreamcast could do. Great, great game. After having such fantastic wrestling experiences with WCW, NWO, Revenge, and WWF No Mercy, Sega comes along and they have their own one. Oh my gosh, THQ is dropping WWF Royal Rumble for the Sega Dreamcast, and based off of the arcade game. Now, I was hoping for a little bit more fleshed out experience, but unfortunately the game has two modes, Exhibition and Royal Rumble. In the Exhibition mode, the player chooses a wrestler along with a partner and wrestles a series of singles matches. The player's partner can interfere on the player's behalf on command, and these partner moves can be used in a number of times during the match, but must be recharged before they can be used again. The object of each match is to wear down the opponent using various attacks, decreasing their life bar before ending the match by pinfall or a knockout. Royal Rumble mode involves a multi-wrestler match in which the player must eliminate a certain number of opponents from the match within a time limit by sending them over the top rope and onto the floor. Eliminating opponents add more time to the player's clock. Eliminating larger wrestlers offers even a higher time bonus. Due to the size of the game's roster, wrestlers appear multiple times in the same Royal Rumble match. Each player has a super meter that fills up during the course of the match, then fills up. The player receives an S icon, which can then be used to instantly recover from pin attempts in Exhibition mode or re-enter the ring during a Royal Rumble match. Reception for the Dreamcast version received average reviews, and one of the biggest criticisms was the small number of playable characters, which IGN called paper thin. The game really lacks mode lack of modes was also criticized. IGN recommended other Japanese Dreamcast wrestling titles, such as Giant Graham over Royal Rumble. The earliest review came from Planet Dreamcast, which gave it a low score of 4 out of 10. Personally, I'm a little more forgiving, as at the time you could have, I think, 9 players in the ring, which was really unheard of at the time, and that still was a fun, all-around experience for the Royal Rumble mode. It was just a really weak game in the WWF franchise, coming off of games like No Mercy and Revenge. It's about a 6 out of 10 though. It's a fun experience with a couple buddies and a couple beers. So yeah, WWF Royal Rumble. There you have it. We can go into the sad decline of the Sega Dreamcast, towards the end, when Peter Moore comes on, at the time president of Sega, and says we need to sell 5 million units in the United States by the end of 2000 to remain a viable platform. And unfortunately, Sega fell short of that goal with some 3 million units sold. However, in such a short time frame for the Sega Dreamcast, having been out a little over 2 years total, there is nothing but quality hit after hit bangers on this system. There's so many great classic titles, so many great graphics, great soundtracks, and just tons of memories. It really is my all-time favorite console, because just the vast number of games that were produced for it, almost all of them were good. There was very few games that were just total garbage on the system. I am definitely going to do an all Sega Dreamcast special. This is, of course, the 25 year anniversary of the Sega Dreamcast. That's near and dear to my heart, and hopefully you all enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments, what was your favorite Dreamcast game? What is your favorite Dreamcast memory? Did you have anything that I missed? This is my personal library, but we can definitely do a part 2 to this at any time, as I have so many fond memories. Thank you guys for joining me as always here at Starflag Media Gaming, and hopefully we'll catch you guys next time.